Hello, everybody. This is Carlos from ActMinds, and today I have here with me Grace Picarati and Lazaro Menezes. Grace is our QA analyst, and Lazaro is one of our key software developers. Then these guys have been working with our clients and always trying to figure out a way to improve performance, improve the way and the processes that to achieve a better productivity and best goals on our projects and clients. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about just a follow-up on our previous webinars. We initially talked about how to make sure your application is performing well from a user standpoint. Then we moved to the second webinar where we went a little bit on the back end of our servers and took a look at a little bit at the metrics and trying to figure out insights from our applications to understand how it behaves and why it might be getting slow, not delivering the best experience to our users. After that, we had our third webinars on the series that the goal was to understand what are the good patterns and practices that we could use and implement on our application to improve performance and reduce the issues or at least the possibility of having bottlenecks on our applications. And finally, now that we already have all this information on how to write good code, we're going to talk a little bit today about DevOps and some of the practices, mainly what we do from a continuous integration and continuous delivery standpoint. So, hey guys, say hi and grab the ball. It's yours, all yours now.
Hello, hello everyone. Good afternoon, good morning.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Carlos, and thank you all for joining us.
All right, so let's get started with our content today as after this introduction from Carlos. So Grace and I are going to talk today is about how we can assure the quality of our software, but not only as a phase of the development cycle, right? Not someone the development team get that software done, and then it after a few time is deployed somewhere, and then someone go there and test, check that, and only after this process, right? So for that, at the beginning, we are just talk briefly about the DevOps process, right? And
Yeah. And also, before we start, we'd like to hear from you guys. Have you guys heard about DevOps? How familiar you guys are? So, Carlos is going to display a quick poll, and please answer us so we can move on.
Right, thank you for reminding me. All right, so please share your experience with us. It will be interesting to learn a little bit about the knowledge you guys have so far about this topic. So how familiar are you with to DevOps? Hopefully you guys will always have, even though those who know a lot about this can take something out of this presentation, I hope. So voting is still going, just a few more minutes, just make sure everybody is able to share. Interesting. Okay, I'll count to 3 and then I'll close this poll. 1, 2, 3, go. Thank you. So we got a tie here. It's a 50% of our attendees mentioned that they wish they could use more the concepts of DevOps on their day-to-day activities, and the other 50% have no idea. Well, they have heard about it, but actually never put it to practice. So I guess this is going to be a very interesting talk today.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get it started. Let's answer the main question here. So what is DevOps? So is it a technique? Is it a product? Is it a technology that you go there and deploy on a server and then finally you have the DevOps working? Not right that. So DevOps is a combination. Actually, the word DevOps, it's a combination of two words, right? And that words mean being development and operations. So basically, it says that the development team work together and close to operations team. So you don't have to, the development team will grab a sprint, some user stories, and finish that user stories and tell the code is there, and someone, a team will, another team will grab that package, compile, build, and deploy to a server and get that working, right? So the main concept behind this combination of words, it's having that done, having this process being done as soon as possible, right? And why implement that? So you get feedback as soon as possible as well on what's going on, what's going wrong, and for achieving that, we have listed here some core practices between DevOps teams, right? Teams that practice the DevOps culture. I would say that DevOps is a culture for teams, right? So major DevOps practitioners use a lot of techniques, and we can outstand these 5 techniques below. So something that most teams do today on software projects is the agile planning and project management. So you have quick, you are able to respond to request change more easy or more quick, right? And within that planning, we have the continuous integration and continuous testing technique. We have continuous delivery techniques. So you are continuously deploying new versions of your software, being that to lower environments or to production environments, right? Monitoring. So we are checking the health of our application, how it's behaving, how users are using our application. So it's not only checking if it's being slow, if everything is running okay, but how users are using the application, right? So which features are most used? Should we focus on this one or not? This kind of response. And one good practice as well is the infrastructure as a code, so you can deploy or launch in new environments as soon as you can, really fast. You do not the philosophy behind the infrastructure as a code, it's getting a complete environment and or a production-like environment for testing purpose with a few clicks or a few commands, right? And for today, we are going to focus on these 2 items here, the continuous integration and testing, and talk a little bit about the continuous delivery process, since we are talking about the quality in the development process, but from the user story up to the deployments, right? And for that, we have again a quick poll. So Carlos, if you could launch the poll, it regards about the process of continuous integration and continuous testing.
Okay, so here it is. Considering that you guys who have been using this are familiar with the terms, so how much of these have you been working with on your day-to-day basis or projects? So have you been using both continuous integration and continuous delivery, or maybe just either of each? or no, there's just this willing of starting doing this new processes and using this new best practices that been hearing about, but we didn't have a chance to implement yet. All right, so we're almost there. I thought we were going to have a tie again, but seems like the table's turning here. And 3, 2, 1, we're done. So 25% of our attendees are already using continuous integration in their projects, and the majority, 75% of the attendees, they just intend to start using it. So they probably our attendees today would most likely to learn more about this and understand how to start using on their projects using Azure and Microsoft tools. So let's hammer it down.
All right, thank you, Carlos. So, given that, let's get started with the continuous integration. So, what it is, and I would be quick here. And briefly, continuous integration means that you have a piece of code that have just been done by the developer on a given task, and we get that task being integrated to the main code base as soon as possible. So if you use Git, you would integrate that on your master branch or on your trunk as soon as possible. And why it helps us? So you first, if implement, let me get back there. All right, so when you implement that, usually you don't have, you try to avoid someone being responsible for doing that in person. It's one of the topics we're going to talk about automation soon, but you would have a centralized place for building the application. And when I talk about building, it's not just compiling the code, but here we start checking our application health with unit tests, for example. So you would use tools like BDD or TDD, and within this process of getting code integrated and built, we would check that and have a good package that would be a deployable, right? And continuously, when we say continuous, I would say on a base of per commit or per integration or even schedule. You could have a nightly build or a daily build. It all depends on how you handle your business and your code, right? But at this point, we have the code unit tested or even behavior tested, but you have a deployable. What we should do after that? We talked about continuous delivery, you mentioned that, but also you want to continuously testing. So how do I test my software after having this deployable?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lázaro. So we learned that DevOps, in a way to say, think that we have a wall between operation and also development team. So we want this wall, we want this communication, this integration, and that's when start our continuous testing. It goes beyond automation, okay, guys? Begins at the moment that a change is made in the development and continue through all the development, the DevOps pipeline stages. What you want to do is test early as possible. You want to shift test. So because think that when you just test at a late stage, when your tests are late, you're risking to have, at best, you can have bugs in production. And this could mean losing money, losing credibility with your clients, and we really don't want that. So the main thing I think is that continuous testing is going to smooth out the testing process. You're not going to have that peaks and valleys that usually we have. So we know that we need to test always, test often, and okay, do we need to change our testing strategy? Do we need to change all that we know until now about tests? No, we don't need to do that. Yeah, go ahead in the next slide, Lazaro. Thank you. So it's more about rethink what we test and where do you test it. So, for example, if you're in your development environment, which tests should we do there? Maybe some unit tests, maybe some APIs, and then we move that to our QA environment or any other environment that you guys have. Maybe we should do some smoke tests. I don't know. We need to check every situation. Also, maybe we need to take over some kind of tests that are most likely to be done in production. We could use the load test that is part of our demo today, right, Lazaro?
Yeah.
Because imagine it that you're only going to find out in production that you have a huge load issue. This in particular, maybe it's not too smart to use when Lazaro just development a new feature. It's not something that you're going to do on your development environment, but could be a good practice to just run those tests on your QA environment. So, okay. When you talk, yeah, so I said like a bunch of times about automation, also Lazaro, because we can automate the process, the builds and delivery, but I want to talk a little bit about automation tests, okay? When you're testing at every step, we're going to have a lot of manual tests. Sometimes you're not going to have your environment is not going to be big enough to run all those tests. So it's a good thing to have some scripts automated, but it's not about go and automate the whole thing. It's not because you can automate the whole thing that you should do that. You need to think and plan which kind of test should I include in this script and maybe run when Lazaro deliver a new build, which should remain as manual. You know what I mean? So automation is going to help you guys, but we need to be smart. We need the skills to plan, to write those tests, to run, so we can really get all the benefits that we can have with DevOps. One thing that I want you guys to think about before you go to our demo and show in practice all that we are talking, think about your environments. How could tests be done there? Which tests should we do? Maybe we have some tests that we need to do or we should do earlier, you know. So think about your client, your application, and maybe we can change our culture and start to continuous testing, okay? So now Lazaro is going to show you guys a demo. I think it will be easier to see in practice, okay?
All right. And right before we start the demo today, would like, guys, do you have any questions for the content that we just talked about and right before we start the demo?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can write your question under the chat and then Carlos can send to
Yeah.
us.
Yep. Okay, so I got a question here. How do we decide what are the first things or we should put effort on to creating tests to ensure best quality? So I'm guessing this question goes as, all right, I have a huge application. I need to start running tests to wrap it with tests and make sure that I have quality, that my scenarios I believe from regression standpoint. So should I put all my efforts on creating these kind of tests? Should I use coverage to make sure I'm going through and the most important path of my application are covered? What will be your advices?
Yeah, we have a lot of situations, but the code coverage that Lazaro is more qualified to speak about, it's a good approach. Also, the main scenarios, the regression main scenarios could be automated, so we can run those things to be sure that nothing is broken there every time we have a new delivery. That would be smart. And also we can include all the new changes in these scripts and all, but when you have continuous testing integration, I think the scripts regression would be a smart way to start.
And just to complete on Grace's answer, I would say that it also depends on how it's your application today, how it's your code today, right? So if your code has not unit test at all, I would start on the opposite way, but writing tests and automation tests for the behavior of the application, and having that behavior drive your changes to achieve unit testable code with your refactors. So I would start on a higher environment than on a dev environment, maybe QA or an environment only for running this kind of tests. So at least you can guarantee that the key behavior of your application, I would say, it's a store, like a web store. So your key features would be sell or product, right? So you would automate that kind of test and start changing the starting from the higher environment to a lower one until you be able to write unit tests and kind of.
Yeah, I think this is a trick question because
it's a good one.
Right, it all depends, right? So if you have an application that's already built, you would probably want to start creating end-to-end tests, make sure you can make sure that your behavior, the application still behaves correctly, and you can trust in the results. But maybe this application is not something that's going to be changed a lot. So you're not going to bother creating web tests or unit tests or integration tests going down this path, especially because it might involve some of redesign of the application, depending on how the components are created. So it might not be that easy to create this kind of tests. So in this situation, you just want it to keep alive and still continue doing what it does. So you might just choose to go with integration, end-to-end tests, and make sure you have good coverage on the path that's most used by your users on the application. And if your application is still under improvement, still under heavy development, so maybe that's a point that you might think about moving forward and adding these other kinds of tests on your application, right? So maybe it requires a little restructuring, refactoring, but it will pay off once you can feel comfortable that your new deployment will not break other existing features.
Yep. Sure. So thank you for the question. Good question. So let's start with our demo, and I'll start with the production code. So here I have a suite, a test that's been run on my production, and my API do an awesome thing that's calculating the nth element on a Fibonacci sequence. And getting from monitoring, we saw that it's low even with such a small number like 40, right? And so when it's going to finish, the last try took 13 seconds. So, all right, it took me 22 seconds. So it's a great performance issue. So our goal for this demo is have all this integrated and tested, right? And finish that and getting this code to production and all continuously. I could have all automated. You will see in the next steps that I just put in some pauses and a few steps just to tell you about the features that are going to show. And for this project, I'm using the Visual Studio Team Services to be my, I would say, my DevOps hub, right? And it acts like a code. It can help us with code repositories and backlog repositories. And I have a bug here that response time is too slow, right? And also I can set up builds for continuous integration steps and also continuous delivery, and also managing all kind of tests that we need to do. So we can have test plans here. These screens show you load test runs. So you can plan your tests. You can have a lot of control of what's being done and document how to reproduce some steps, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, live here on my build, and I get my code here from my API. Oops. So I have my API here. It's been handled by this. That endpoint is being handled by this function, and I have a library, and I have a call here, and just passing the number. And if I get my library, I see that default is showing using recursion that tends to be slow with the amount of recursion that you do, right? So I would try another strategy that's it's a math that would calculate that number, just to illustrate our process. So let me get my change. So I'm using I did my changes, so I'm developer there on my machine with my coffee and did my changes, right?
And once this is done, what's
Hey.
Hey, so just before I continue, I would like to thank you, man, for doing this, because I see how complicated it is to type with this button on. And yeah, thank you. I know you love these tools. You love Azure, so you even got your cast like a blue cast, Azure cast.
Yeah.
So
It's all blue.
go forth and conquer, man.
Thank you. Thank you, man. I almost getting used to that. It has been 1 month, I guess.
Yeah, you're going
One
to
more
miss
to
this.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to miss this. I think he's gonna save to use here.
It's now.
All right. So I'm just staging my changes, and I'll get some commit message here. And I hope this fixed my performance issue. All right. And what I'm going to do now is to synchronize my code and push my code to my repository. And just right before I push that button, I will show you what's going to happen. So we talked about continuous integration, right? So I have here is a build definition that I'm going to edit this. And on this build definition, I have some steps. And before talking about the steps, I will show this trigger tab. That this definition is set up. It looks to my repository for all branches or for any branch that I want to trigger this build on any integration on this branch. So it depends on how you manage your workflow of integration code. You could have you look to a branch, but you don't. Usually, sometimes you do not push direct straight to that branch, right? Usually, you manage a pull request, and so. But by the way, so sorry. But this means that this trigger enable would fire my build on each commit, and also it could be scheduled. We can schedule that, like I said before, to
Yeah, and this could be really useful when you have, for example, a client with different time zones. So you need to schedule, for example, to go to prod. In this case, we have Monday through Friday at 3 a.m. but you could change to whatever you want, right? Little.
Yep. So if you would like to have a daily build or a nightly build, and that's a practice on most companies uh, on, on on some software projects, right? You could have that as well. And of course, you can fire these builds manually. So here are my continuous integration steps. When I trigger that push button, I would use it would grab my source code, and that source code can be retrieved for I'm talking here that's on this project, so I have a Git repository here, but also if you use GitHub or you have your own Git server or you use Subversion, you could use that as well, right? And it's basically, the steps here would basically grab the code, grab dependencies, run a few unit tests, copy files to build, install production dependencies. So I would reduce the size of my package, and zip everything and publish. But it's not going to deploy yet. I'll get there. All right. So let me fire this, and let me get back here. All right, the last one was 158, and so 159 should start pretty soon, as soon as it finishes pushing.
All right, so what you're saying is basically this is the heart of continuous integration, right? So you have a tool that keeps looking at a specific branch or a specific event from source control, and when code is pushed to that branch, it automatically will just go ahead, grab it, build it, run a bunch of tests, and give you reports and status on what's up with your current or your newest commit on that branch.
Yeah, that's correct. So the build is finishing here. It will take a few minutes to download this, a few seconds to download these dependencies, and all of this is being done on cloud. But if you want to, or if you need to, you can set up your own agents to use with that. So you can have your own premises build server, but also use this cloud interface for that. All right, so it just finished here, and okay, all green. Let me get to the release tab. So as like as the build, I have a deploy release definition here, and you can see this lot of squares. What those squares or rectangles mean? They are the environments that I want to deploy to. So you can see here on this release 23, is it deploying to my QA environment? And I still have UAT, and I have the production environment. So let me show you what this definition define as a task. All right, so here are my environments, and for each environment I can set up some tasks, right, that could be done. So they are not all the same tasks for each environment. And what was my issue? It was a load performance issue. So I set up here a quick load test that will retrieve a URL here, there on the server after the deployment. And if everything went fine, so if in the case of this test, it will take 1 minute to run. It will run for 60 seconds, but it has a warm up and a tree down, so it takes about 2 minutes. Sorry. And if all my requests goes below 1,000, right? It would pass, and if it passes, I can set up all this environment to continuously deliver to the next environment, right?
Yes.
So all my QA environment here, I named this. You can name what you want. So I can set up also acceptance tests here. Also, in case of an API like I'm using, I could have tests that go to that endpoints and check the results, like end-to-end tests for an environment. Or here I'm using an Azure App Service, but if I have a more complex environment, so I need to test a web a front-end project. So, but this front-end project requires APIs to be startup, and databases. You could also set this up. Here you have a lot of tasks that you can use, right? And you can set up a test dev and lab on Azure with a complete setup of virtual machines for databases and integration, API servers and front-end servers, and deploy what you want and just run your tests. So let me check on the run, how's it going?
Yeah, no, and I just want to say that you could include, as Lazaro said, you could include your test cases and your scripts and thinking what you need in each of the environments, and they could be manual, they could be automatized, so you need to think what will help you most. So
Yep. So it's about to finish. Meanwhile, while it's going on, I would show something that's going to happen after this being finished on the deployment to QA and hopefully the test pass. On my definition here, I have a trigger, and this trigger also this release is triggered as a continuous deployment. So if something happens here on an artifact, so if something happens on that build, it will trigger this release, so this deployment, and as well, again, it could be scheduled. And down below, we have environment wise triggers. So for the QA environment, it's triggered after the release creation. So I have a release definition. So I create a release, and right after creating the release, it triggers the QA environment build. And also UAT, it's also automated, if you see it there. So after a successful deployment on QA, it will just automatically trigger. So what is a successful deployment in QA? In my case, the application being there and the load tests running, right?
yes.
Okay. And something that you can see, this little guy here, it's something that you can define as well. There are people, if you need and if you require manual steps, you can define people that can approve or reject some deployments. Let me check if it's done. All right, so my QA is green, and you can see that my UAT is blue right now because it's running at this very moment. So now I'm deploying to this UAT environment, and this UAT environment is set up with a post deployment approval. So when it's approved, when it's done, it's already pending approval. So it's done, it's deployed there. So now I need manual tests. So even if I want to go there, or if you need to run manual tests, in this case I want. So my final users are testing that, and let's check if it's okay. It was a little fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better. Right. The performance is better.
Yeah. So I can have a group of people. You would need the approval of everyone or just one member, and that everyone can be on any other order or in a given order. So my deploy is there, it's done, but it's not succeeded yet. Why? Why I didn't approve that? So if I approve this deployment, now it's succeeded and launched the deploy to production. But here for this demo, I put in a pre-deployment approval. So it's a bit different. So start touching my servers, it requires approval, or if you need this deployment to be done on a given date or in a given hour, I don't know, because user load, it all depends on your infrastructure, right? So if a deployment to your production environment will have a downtime, you can schedule that for I don't know, later hours or like 2 a.m. or something, right? But here I'm just deploying right now. Okay, and this is starting to deploy to production, is in progress. And I have a post approval here as well, because I can run manual tests. I can have, if I want to, I can have someone going in production and testing my key features.
Yeah.
Or
And you should do actually too.
yeah, and why
This-
not?
Yeah, and as also this could be automatic or
Mhm.
manual as we're doing here, just so you guys can see how you can have both, you know.
Yeah, and why not running automated tests after here on my API? I have 2 endpoints. I could just hit those endpoints and say, okay, they are working in production after a deployment. So I'll automate it.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is very powerful and might be not very clear and the example we're doing here, but the same code generates the same packages and the same packages deployed to multiple environments. So I know this is a very simple application, doesn't have many dependencies and everything, but still it's there. The deployment process doesn't require you to tweak files and manually update web configs or such things when you deploy into different environments. So this is really powerful when you start managing your code and your application configuration in such a way so you don't have to worry about deployments. It's just a click away from getting to a different environment.
Yeah, and
also about tests, you could just set up a bunch of scripts that could do your smoke test, so you don't need someone to go and actually see if the features are there, you know. You're gonna have this right away, this feedback, and okay, we have all that we just did there, we can go on our manual test. You don't need to lose time to check that is not properly deployed.
right that. Okay, so just asking me for approval again. So now I have my code in production.
And also it's cool that you can see when you have an error, it's red, and the follow steps, they are gray. So it's waiting an action.
All right, so okay, so I tried again in production right now and I could get a better response time. All right, so I have, before it was 20 seconds and now it is just half a second. So we addressed that. Let me try a bigger number. Okay, I could get a bigger number. All right, so for continuous integration and continuous delivery, and why not continuous testing, that's our focus. This is part of our demo, how you can use those tools, those Visual Studio Team Sources tools, to fix that. Just to finish this part of the demo, I'm showing you the load test. I had a load test. Oh, you
Yeah,
want
no.
to? All right.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So I had a load test set up there on my QA environment. So, and that you can check that load results here.
Yeah, you can see the last where is the mouse? Oh, it's here. So you can see the last one here. When you open, could you open please, Lazaro? Yeah, this.
Sure.
So you can see the average response time, the user load that you set up before, the request per second. If you failed, you could see how the percent of these failed and errors. You can see also your test settings, top slow pages. It's pretty cool. It's all regarding the load test that we did before. Also, in this part, you can set up your test cases. Lazaro, could you please open the first option? Yep, thank you. We have just two tasks. One is the load test that Lazaro did, and the other one is just a regular manual test case that you can include. Could you open, please, Lazaro? Okay, it's loading. You can see you can include the action, the step-by-step in your expected results. You can include a print screen, an image that you want. You can attach that to another add link, or there's no need to have another tool. You can just use here and plan your whole test, manual, scripts, load, and so on. So it's a pretty cool tool.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lázaro.
use this tool to manage your test cases and attach them to user stories or tasks or bugs.
Will be all
And
linked.
also, and also if you want to use a desktop tool instead of going to web every time, you can synchronize this, guys, with the Microsoft Test Manager as well. It will load here. And we would have pretty much the same test suites and the same documenting of your tests. All right.
Yeah, that's just the web version that we have from this one, this testing center that you can plan, test, track, and organize. So you can see here the same test case that we create there.
Yeah.
The manual one and the load one.
Yep. So that concludes our demo for today. And now, guys, everything is it's open to questions.
Yeah, open to question.
So
I have a question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Are these tests that you just showed, are they version controlled or somehow attached or related to the commits you're testing on your application?
We can attach this test to a backlog item, or let me say a bug, or a user story, or a task. So I could add it here. Let me just get the ID 159.
Right. Well, the question is not to associate this with a story or a issue, but actually to a particular commit in code.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Because the applications evolve, right? So, and your tests should evolve as well. But for some reason, if you manage two different types of two different versions of your application, and version 2 has a lot of more features than version 1, which we just want to keep compatible with the new stuff. And for some reason, I need two different sets of tests for each application.
I got it.
So if I need to create a hot fix and on a version that's been deployed like 2 months ago, and I can't actually run the current test suite against it. Right?
I got it. I got it. You can update your tests. So if you have a new scenario, I would say for this test case here, if you have a new scenario, you can update that to reflect your new version, right? And here you have a history of how your test evolved. So you can get previous versions of that test and check within your new code version. So they are all versioned here by the tool as you change that and update these test scenarios.
All right, cool.
All right.
Let's see if we have any other questions or raising hands. All right, guys, so I think this is it. I wanted to thank you for doing this demo. It was really exciting, and even myself, I learned a lot what you guys are talking about. And, hopefully our attendees also enjoyed it.
Yeah,
all right.
And if you have any question, you can contact us, have our emails. We are open to question, to talk about DevOps and testing and so on. Would be a pleasure.
Right. Okay.
So
And
here's
stay
our
tuned.
emails.
Soon, this webinar will be available on Actimind's blog. We'll see a reference to the video, the recording, so you can always refer back to this if you have any questions or reach out directly to one of our panelists. And thank you all for joining. Hope to see you soon in the next webinar. Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.